Welcome back to the first week of personnel psychology. In this video, I want to provide an overview of personnel psychology. The textbook in this class is a human resource management textbook, but the class is focused on personnel psychology. Sometimes the content of these lectures and the slides will not match up exactly to the textbook. I tried to pick out the information that is most relevant to a personnel psychologist. If you are interested in learning more about human resource management, a class in HRM will cover topics that we don't cover in this class. It is perfectly acceptable for you to take both human resources and personnel psychology because they are two slightly different fields of interest. Personnel psychology is the study of and application of psychology to the workplace. Specifically, personnel psychologists study recruitment, selection, training, and performance management. All four of these topics will be covered in this class in the coming weeks. Personnel psychology has two main objectives. One, to research work behavior and develop theories that explain this behavior. The second focus is on the application of research. Yes, research is very important to the field, but we also want to make sure that our research means something, that it makes a difference, that it can be used in the real world. Personnel psychologists have a number of different goals. Goal number one is to ensure that employers are treating their employees fairly. This involves all aspects of the employer-employee relationship, everything from recruitment to training to legal considerations. All of these topics are of interest to a personnel psychologist. Goal number two is to improve individual performance, effectiveness, and productivity. We will learn a little bit more about the differences between those three, performance, effectiveness, and productivity, in a few weeks. As part of this goal, this attempt to improve performance, personnel psychologists conduct what we call job analyses to better understand the job, so that then we can try to find the best fit for that particular job. Improving performance also involves training programs. It involves motivation, communication, rewards, compensation, a lot of different moving pieces to job performance. And then finally, at the organizational level, the organization's culture, its structure, its leadership hierarchy, these are different factors within the organization that also have an impact on performance. A personnel psychologist tries to figure out how all of these things work together and how they can change or make adjustments to different parts of the job, the organization, the training program, the technology being used, how they can make adjustments to parts of the job to allow for improvements to be made. Human resource management is slightly different. Human resource management concerns the policies, practices, systems, and decisions that influence the workforce. The concept of human resources is referring to all of the people, all of the humans within an organization. They're considered resources because without them, most companies would not survive, right? One of the major activities is to contribute to the organization's big picture goals and their success. It is not enough for us to work in a silo. A personnel psychologist must understand what the organization is trying to accomplish. They must understand the performance goals of the organization, the financial goals, the legal aspects, the marketing aspects, operations, strategy. All of those things are important to reaching those two goals. It's very difficult to ensure people are being treated fairly and try to improve their performance if you don't understand the big picture. So that's one activity, trying to understand the big picture and figure out how the people of an organization can contribute to that bigger picture. The different activities that we'll talk about throughout the semester: recruitment, selection, training, compensation, all of these different aspects are interdependent. When we make a change to the recruitment system, it changes the selection system, it changes the training system, it changes all the steps that happen after it. Both fields try to apply the research. It's usually a good idea to find some evidence that a new solution or a new strategy works before you try to implement it. You could waste a lot of time and money implementing something that doesn't actually work. The whole idea is to contribute to the bottom line. So we need to first understand the organization, understand how all the moving pieces fit together, and then try to identify evidence-based strategies that will work in our organization with our people. In this chart, you see 5 different components, 5 different activities that are considered important to the work of either a personnel psychologist or a human resource management. So let's just look briefly at each one of them. The design of the organization will impact the other 4 activities. And it is something that you would want to consider anytime you're having an issue with an individual employee, or you're wanting to make a large scale change. Have to think about how the work is distributed among multiple people, how those people interact, the technology that they use. And then also how that work is then connected to the organization's mission, vision, strategy. The other 4 activities are shown here. Staffing has to do with the recruiting, the selecting of people, and termination. Performance appraisal and management involves measuring job performance, giving feedback to employees, and also working to improve performance. Training and organizational development are also attempts to improve both at the individual and at the organizational level. Finally, the reward systems, the benefits, the compensation. One of the things I like about this first chapter in this textbook is its coverage of current trends in HR and personnel psychology. I have 4 here. So globalization technically is the process of integrating people, systems, governments, and national and local economies. It's the process of integrating all those different components all over the globe into one giant system. Globalization has impacted the workplace in a few ways. Barriers of entry have been reduced. In other words, it is now easier for people from any country to start a business. It's still not easy, but it's easier than it was 50 years ago before the internet. Because those barriers have been reduced, there are now more people starting businesses in other countries, which increases the international competition. When the cost of transportation increases, it makes it more difficult for people and goods to travel around the world. So sometimes these increases in cost can contribute to what we call reverse globalization, where that integration of people and systems across the globe that integration begins to break down. When the cost of transportation decreases, more people move around, goods move around. Also, the cost of US labor has increased steadily over the last few decades, which has led some companies to invest in machinery and automation as opposed to their human resources. It's becoming more and more common for HR managers to become involved in these changes, in expanding the company in a new country, in restructuring and downsizing. Managers are now sitting at the table because they have a specialization, they have an expertise that some of the other business leaders may not have. In relation to globalization, some of the things that HR managers and personnel psychologists do is conduct vocational counseling for employees who have been terminated. They help develop the new staffing system within the new structure, and just having an HR manager involved in these processes can raise legal issues and help the company minimize the risk for lawsuits later on. Advances in technology is the second trend that affects these two fields. The second trend that impacts these two fields is advances in technology. Web-based systems provide advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are that these systems can help us automate different processes, so emailing one another, tracking employees, evaluating resumes, conducting online interviews, conducting online training. Web-based systems allow us to do these things that we were never able to do before computers. In many cases, we're able to save time and money. Web-based systems can also then allow personnel psychologists to focus on the big picture because they're not tied up with administrative tasks. These systems can also reduce labor costs and help us make more money, help us contribute to the bottom line. So the idea is to try to meet those two goals, make sure people are treated fairly, and try to improve performance within the organizational context, within their particular goals. Within the last few decades, a third trend has emerged. There is an increase in litigation and regulation in terms of employment situations. Violating laws and regulations can be extremely costly. If your company gets taken to court for employment discrimination, for example, it could end up costing that company $10, $15, $20 million for a single instance of employment discrimination. I have a few examples here of just how much it can cost when an organization violates a federal employment law. So you can see here over the years, Coca-Cola has paid over $165 million in employment discrimination lawsuits. Walmart is at the top of the list with hundreds of millions of dollars. The final trend that I want to talk about is the changes in the workforce, in the characteristics of the people who go to work. Most of the growth in the US workforce has come from minority groups. More and more women and ethnic minorities are entering the workplace. There are more dual earner couples, and then more and more millennials are also joining the workforce as the baby boomers begin to retire. These changes in demographics are relevant because HR and personnel psychologists are usually responsible for solving any issues, keeping up with the changes, and managing the recruitment, selection, performance systems. And we often respond with different strategies. So we might create diversity initiatives, institute flexible work schedules, try to establish new types of training, And even some companies are building daycare centers on campus, on their premises, to help their employees deal with work-family balance challenges. Measurement is key to personnel psychology. It is extremely important that we measure as many things as we can. It is not enough to say that employee performed well. We have to collect evidence. We have to collect data from that employee to be able to show to someone else that that employee is in fact performing at the expected level. Most organizations can improve and make more money if they invest in their human resources. But those investments have to be made strategically. You can't just hire everyone who scores the highest on an intelligence test and expect that to work out. Because remember, the systems are connected. Who we recruit, who we select, who we train, who we keep, who we reward, all of those things, they're all interconnected. We have to make sure that when we're measuring applicants' characteristics, when we're trying to measure performance, when we're trying to measure whether or not a training program actually taught people something, there are 3 different challenges that we might face when trying to measure workplace behaviors. Number 1, do we fully understand the connection between the behavior and the organization's goals? It's quite a leap, right, to go from an individual person to the organization's goals, their mission. Explain that linkage with measurement, and I'll show you here in a second an example of how we do that with what we call scorecards. The second challenge is a metrics challenge. Are we measuring what we should be measuring? Are we measuring a relevant phenomena? If we aren't, we're wasting time and money. The third challenge is an execution challenge. Do we have all the resources that we need to not only do the actual measurements, but do we have all the resources needed to use that data, those measurements, to actually make decisions? So how do we measure organizational performance? How do we make that link between employees or human resources and what the organization is trying to do? Scorecards are, and have been for many years, a common way of doing this. Scorecards involve measurements, numbers, data. They are also a visual way to look at the connection between different aspects of the organization. So you'll see here on this particular scorecard, this is an example I pulled from the originators of the scorecard. The scorecard attempts to connect all of those things so that improvements made to any one part of the system will in fact contribute to an improvement in the overall system. So here is an example for pharma, and this is their workforce scorecard. So this particular scorecard is focused on the human resources, on the people. Here's an example of a scorecard for a company called Pharma. What we see here in each one of these boxes, we see the criteria that this company is going to use to determine whether or not they're on the right track. So marketing and sales, this department is going to pay attention to the length of the service calls. That has to do with the length of a service call is going to be an indicator of the success of that particular department. That's sort of the department level. At the individual level, they're also going to pay attention to employees' team performance. Looks like they have a leadership profile, some type of assessment, probably made in-house or customized for them. They're also going to pay attention to those different things. This column is for the marketing and sales department. We have a column for manufacturing. We have a column for research and development. This scorecard is essentially identifying how we're going to score how well the human resources are contributing to the overall organization. Here we have part 2 of that same scorecard. You can look at the competencies that we're expecting. Marketing and sales department, they're going to look at the pay and the bonus, how many of the best employees are earning those extra options and those extra bonuses. They're also going to look at how the individuals, how well they understand the strategy, how well they're committed to it. Do they have the skills? Do they feel like they're part of the organization? And then finally, that very last row, workforce financials. This scorecard is the HR scorecard. It is related to the workforce scorecard, but this is sort of the bigger picture. It involves everything from what does success look like, to the costs of trying to make that happen, the HR practices that we might need to use, and then how does the HR department contribute to the overarching goals. We have goals in this particular column, how we're going to measure whether or not we're meeting those goals. So this is the measure we're going to use. The next column shows us the target, the goal for that particular measure. And then this last column details some of the things that we'd like to start doing in the future to help us reach those targets that are related to the measures that are related to the objectives. If we combine the HR scorecard with the workforce scorecard, we get what is called a balanced scorecard. This is the big picture. This is where we connect our 2 other scorecards with the organization's big pictures. Here, you can see here that when it comes to the organization, we're looking at the customer, the finances, operations, as well as human resources. Human resources is just one part of the bigger picture. Balanced scorecards help align all of those systems so that they can work in tandem and hopefully create some synergy and get some things done. When we combine these 3 scorecards, we're better able to see that connection between the individual and the organization. And we're better able to make a plan for moving forward. When we understand what we're dealing with, it's easier to make decisions. And we tend to make better decisions because we see things for what they truly are. The most profitable companies in the world use a variety of what we call high performance work practices. I have a list of different examples on the next slide, but essentially what these practices are, they are ways to ensure that our employees are happy and that they're improving at an acceptable level. Things like making sure we recruit a large number of people, validating our selection tests, paying people slightly above market prices so we can retain them, but also so that we can attract the most qualified applicants to begin with. Small and large businesses try to find ways to set themselves apart from their competition, to provide unique value to their customers. When they're able to do this, when they find that special secret sauce, that special formula, we call it a competitive advantage. That company, that employer has something that their competitors do not, which gives them an advantage over those competitors. Competitive advantage can be created in 2 different ways: through the perceptions of the customer and also through the uniqueness of the product or service. When it comes to perceived customer value, customers in their minds have thoughts about the value they get from purchasing, you know, a drink or a device or a piece of clothing. Essentially, we want our customers to be happy with their product or service. The happier our customers are, generally the more of an advantage we have over our competition. The same goes for uniqueness. The more unique a product or service, the harder it is to copy, and therefore the more of an advantage it provides to that particular employer. Within the last few decades, the things that are happening in the world and the choices that employers make about those world events impact how customers, clients, and employees look at that company. Corporate social responsibility has to do with the degree to which an employer cares about its community and makes decisions that consider the broader community. Some organizations, for instance, have implemented organization-wide recycling programs because those organizations care, they say they care, about the environment. So the recycling program is a way for that company to show its employees, its customers, its clients, we care about the environment. We care so much that we recycle here too. Everything from the way that companies treat their workers, to the policies that are put in place, to the way that a company tweets or posts on Facebook. All of those things reflect something about those companies, and all of those factors are used by people like you and I to make decisions about whether they want to shop with that company, use that particular company's service. There are at least 4 different ways for companies to be unique. We can think about uniqueness in terms of the cost of the product. We can think about it in terms of how special that product or service is, how different it is from all the other products and services that are being offered. A company's product or service, it may be delivered in a unique way. Watch in the next 50 years or so, some of your favorite items may be delivered by drone. Some organizations are known for their human resources. They are known for recruiting, selecting, and training the best. For instance, the FBI, the CIA, the Marines, Navy SEALs. Organizational capability is what we will focus on in this class. We will try to focus on ways for companies to ensure, I'm going to go back to those goals, to ensure that their employees are being treated fairly and that they are performing at the best of their ability. Thank you for joining me today. I will see you again next week.